Human babies are born into the world with an astounding dependence on their social environment. No animal is less capable when it is born. Then, unlike any other animals, they inherit powerful symbolic systems from the fellow members of their species with which they can make meaning of the world, representing it to themselves, and make meaning with each other, what we call communication. And for example, as we grow, we learn the language of our community. So Japanese babies learn Japanese, German babies learn German, hearing impaired babies learn the symbols of sign language. These symbol systems make meaning in the world to which they refer by classifying, by grouping, by categorizing, by generalizing and abstracting. Things that are seen and felt and used in everyday life. This symbolizing has two fundamental and closely connected dimensions. One is symbol to symbol sense, the other is symbol to word reference. Babies don't work out the meanings of the world for themselves. They do it, of course, through their families and their carers. And they do it by engaging with what we have called so far available designs. However, these designs that they are born into are not static inheritances. They're not something which babies assimilate or simply accommodate. They are what is given to us in our culture, what surrounds us and what precedes us. But it is a powerful system that allows us to recombine meanings and make sense of the world in ways that are never exactly the same.
I'm going to end now by talking about literacies across the curriculum. So in the curriculum, we might do history, we might do math, and so on. But in a sense, what I want to argue is that that literacies are an important way of thinking through what we know and representing what we know for the purposes of assessment, for example. So, for example, in history, it's one thing to say the French Revolution happened in 1789, and you can give an A, B, C, D answer to that. That's a fact. But in fact, what we want people to do in history, we want them to think, well, what were the causes of the French Revolution and what were its consequences? That can really only be represented in writing, and it's even better represented if you can put images and what in it. In math, it's one thing to get the right answer to a problem, but it's another thing to explain your reasoning behind that answer. To get a problem which is represented in writing, which is the way you might represent the real world or represented in a video or image or diagram, and then working your way through to the answer such that your workings make sense. You might have got the right answer by mistake, or you might have got the wrong answer with the right reasoning, where a slight analysis of your reasoning might help you get the right answer. So in other words, these become all forms of writing. In other words, writing becomes then a form of representation, particularly multimodal writing. So if we say in writing, it includes mathematical notation. In writing, it includes diagrams of triangles and whatever it is we're talking about in geometry, for example. In other words, these are actually all forms of writing. So right across all the subject areas, and particularly to represent these abstract disciplinary practices which make conceptual thinking different from everyday oral vernacular thinking and speaking, right? That these are things which are characteristically forms of multimodal literacy.
Evidence of a final stage in the development of child thought is to be found when words are used as fully fledged concepts. Conceptual thinking involves using words to abstract, to single out defining elements that categorize events, people or objects under a single word, to unite and separate, to analyze and synthesize. For example, Rusty is a dog, and a dog is a kind of mammal, and mammals are kinds of vertebrae, and vertebrae are kinds of animals, and animals are different from plants. In the first stage of conceptual thinking, the child will form the use and use a concept quite correctly in a concrete situation, but will find it strangely difficult to express that concept in words. The greatest difficulty is encountered when, having grasped the abstract concept, the child then has to reapply it to a new concrete situation. Concepts do not only refer to the world in abstract, generalizing ways, because when, having seen many dogs, you encounter a breed that you might never have seen before, but nevertheless you can recognize it as a dog. Concepts also refer to each other in a symbolic system. For example, knowing that dogs are kinds of animals, as are cats, but not fish, but that fish are also animals.
One little example now. Here we have a tree where we're a tree of life. So I might say birds and fishes and animals. Well, this is a more elaborate tree of life, a taxonomy of the origins of life on Earth. So we might be doing this in science, for example. And if I go on and look at this image now, that we might take something like a lungfish, which, that looks like a fish, it's in an aquarium, it's underwater. Well, one of the funny things about lungfish is, in fact, when we have a definition of the relationships of different life forms, and here's the definition, that if we share a common ancestor, we're on the same path, the same in the taxonomic structure. That's the classic evolutionary theory of evolution. That in fact, lungfish and cows share a more recent common ancestor than lungfish and salmon. So in other words, we can see things in the world which are not perceptible in everyday experience by building these resources of academic literacy, which in this case are both linguistic but also visual. That diagram helps you explain the logic of the idea. So here we are, in this multimodal literacy, we're building science.
Literacies are a medium for thinking. They also represent an ever-present extension of memory and personal thinking, overcoming its limitations. Literacies are the social memory outside of our individual minds that, as we grow, becomes an essential supplement to our adult minds. Literacies are knowledge that we can always reach when we can't remember something, so we can look it up, we can ask someone else who knows, we can read something, we can replay a piece of audio. In these ways, literacies are conceptual artifacts. We can use these to extend the stuff of our brains. Literacies then are the accumulated, collective, distributed, and essentially human intelligence that we share. They are the products of communities. They are the glue that binds our communities. They are ever-present and always needed social extensions of our personal minds.
What are we then going to do with synesthesia? What's the practical consequences of synesthesia in this world? Well, what we're going to do in academic literacies is we are going to encourage students to use all the tools they've got in this digital world. There's a brilliant range of tools, from video to digital cameras, which are just the phone in your pocket, through to diagramming tools, through to capturing oral language by recording it, through to capturing sounds with recording. So what we have is a remarkable set of tools for representing what we know in these multimodal knowledge representations, in these multimodal forms of writing. So what we need is, if we want our learners to become capable of representing what they know, let's say we're representing a bit of science, we've done an experiment, the most complete and convincing and powerful representation is when I've pulled out my phone, I've taken a little video of the experiment where I demonstrate this gestural stuff, I draw a diagram which shows process and flow, I write a paragraph, I make a list, I put in a data set, I put in a table. So all these different things come together and they form this multimodal knowledge representation. So we actually need these tools, these literacies tools, these multimodal literacy tools. That's what we need in the 21st century to be able to teach science, and to teach science beyond the A, B, C, D answer view of science, which is science as forms of reasoning, science as modes of thinking, science as a form of argumentation, science as a form of explanation, science as a form of representation of information. It's not facts and getting things right. It's all those abstract conceptual things which are most appropriately carried via academic literacies.
The notion of literacy across the curriculum is not a new one, but recently it has grown in focus and more attention is being paid to it. And this is evident by many curriculum documents across the state and across nations. Within these documents, literacy is posited as integral to the various subject areas, with discipline-specific literacies or curriculum literacies residing within these. It is a recognition that each subject area has its own systemic way of writing, thinking and representing their work, whether it be science or history or commerce. Each subject has a specific range of ways in which it needs to be represented and understood. In this way, literacy is considered to be the work of all teachers, regardless of the context in which they work, regardless of the subject area of the disciplines they teach. All teachers are literacy teachers.